slide is all about deploying containers, logging onto them, and exiting them. Okay, so as we learned earlier, Docker runs container from locally available images. We need to download the image on the Docker host and then run the containers from it. Alternatively, if we run a container from an image which is not available locally, then the Docker engine downloads the image from the configured registry first, and only then does it run the container from it. So let's run the command to check all of the images that are available on our local host. We will then download the images for the Redis and Nginx images containers that we have. So let's go back to the host and run the command docker ls to list the available images. We only have the hello world image which we used earlier. So now let's download the required images with the command docker pull, and we want to download the Redis. It will download the latest image from the Redis repository. Now let's also download the latest image of Nginx. So docker pull Nginx. Okay, and let's check the available images now. Docker image ls, it will show all the images that we've just downloaded. As you can see, we have all the required images now. Now using the images, we can run containers on the local system. Let's run an Ubuntu container on the Docker host in an interactive manner. As we know, container is just providing the user space of the Ubuntu. It is using the kernel of the host. Anyway, once connected, we will check the file system and the running processes inside the container. We will later exit it. Let's go to the host and run the container directly from the latest Ubuntu image. So for that, we can say docker run -it and then Ubuntu. Since the image is not locally available, it will first download it. We are automatically connected to the containers once it is up and running. So ls command will show the container file system. So we can also check the user I'm logged in with, and we can check the running processes at this point using ps-ef also. We can also check those things. So if we see, as expected, nothing much is running except for the bash shell that we have by default. So let's exit from here now. Now let's run a container and then connect another session to the same container, running container. There are two ways to connect to the already running container, either by using the attach command or by using the exec command. When we use the attach command, we connect to the local standard input, output, and error streams. There is only one instance of the shell. When we exit from attach, the existing container also exists. Let's see it in the action. So let me run another Ubuntu container here. So docker run -it Ubuntu, and then I'm automatically connected to it. Now we want to connect another session to the same container. For that, let me run another putty session and log into it as Pushpam Saxena. Okay, so let me now list the running containers out here in this. There should be only one. So there's only one container. Let's attach to this container using the container ID now. Okay, docker attach to this container ID that we've just provided. Now if I run the ps-es, I would see there is just one instance of shell running. As there is only one shell, the stream of input, output, and error is same for all the sessions. Let's run ls now, right, and exit from the session. We'll exit the container from both. Okay, so this is done. Now exec command is primarily used to run the command in a running container. We can run a new shell using exec. When we exit a new shell, the existing shell and another container remains running, unlike the other option that we've seen. So let's go to the host and create another container using the Ubuntu image. And once it is up, as usual, we will be connected to it automatically. So now let's connect through another session as we did earlier. Okay, Pushpam Saxena I'll be logging in as. Now let's run the now let's run the ps command, right? So it is now let's exec exec docker exec -it and the container ID we want to connect it to. So you'll use this container ID. Okay, now ps-ef will give us two shells running because we have connected. If I exit from one of these, other one remains connected. Okay, exited. Now if I do ps or once again docker ps, I will see that session is gone, but then the container is still running. It doesn't stop the container from running. We can also run containers in detach mode. It means that the container runs in the background and the terminal is free for other commands. The terminal does not provide input to the container, nor does it display the output of the container. So let's run multiple containers in detach mode. We can use various images like Nginx, Redis and Mongo. So let's go back here. Docker run -d is for detached mode, and we will run the Nginx. Here the container is run and the terminal is now free for other commands. Let's run another container using MongoDB image. So that is also in detach mode. And then also run the Redis container with the detach mode. Now if you want to check all of these containers, then run the docker ps command. Let's check. As you see, all of the containers are running in the background. Okay, so we can check the docker run commands help also for any more details. So let's go back and have a look at the docker run help command. So docker run -help, you can see various commands. We will also more it. So using this command, you can see various commands available with the run commands, right? So all the options that are available with the docker run can be accessed using this help command. Hello everyone. In this nugget, we are going to see how to handle the various stages a Docker container can be in during its life cycle. So let's start a couple of containers in detached mode with Redis and Nginx images. Okay, so let's go back to our host. Yeah, first run it in the Nginx and the Redis. Okay. Let's list this using the docker ps command. So we have these two containers running now from what we have done earlier. Now we can stop a container using the docker stop command followed by the container ID or the container name. So let's stop the container spun from our Redis image. So docker stop. Okay. And we will do this with the container name. So let's use this, and we have stopped it. And now let's stop the container spun from the Nginx using the container ID. So we will say docker stop, and we will use the docker ID of the Nginx Docker. Okay. Now if we run the docker ps command again, let's do that. Now we don't see these two containers. That's because the docker ps just returns the running containers. Now if we need to list the stopped containers also, we need to run the command with -a option so that it can list all of the containers. So now let's do that. So here you can see it is clearly indicating that these two dockers are in exited state. We can also start an already stopped container using a docker start command. It can again be followed with the container name or container ID, whichever we want to do. So let's start the Redis container which is stopped, which is in the stopped state already. Okay, so let us do this docker start, and we will use this Redis ID. Okay, so now it is started. We will also, let's have a look at the ps command. Now if you look at this, it is now showing that it is running and up for 4 seconds. Now on the similar lines, we can restart a running container using the docker restart command. So let's restart the already running container of the Redis Docker. Okay, so let's do a docker, let's clear the screen a bit, and then docker ps. It will show us, just note this down, it is up for 33 seconds, that is this particular container is running. Now we will restart this particular container using its ID. So docker restart and the ID. Now if you do docker ps and make sure, look at the status, it is up for 3 seconds. That means it is restarted. This docker, the container is restarted. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome back. In this nugget, we will understand where in the file system does Docker store the images, containers and other details. So let's go back to our host and we will go to the Docker directory over there. So let's cd /var/lib/docker and do a listing of folders. So if you try to do it without sudo permissions, then it will be permission denied error. So let's first do sudo su and then try to run this listing. Okay, so as you run the listing, you would see various directories out here, and then you see the containers directory. Let's go in this containers directory and check the contents over there. Now if you match the number of directories with the output of docker ps-a command, we will understand that there is one directory for each container. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the docker ps-a command to list all the dockers that we have on here on this host. So as you can see, there are two dockers, there are two containers, and the container ID in the docker ps-a command matches the first 12 characters of the directory name. So if you look at the Redis container here, the ID and the first character of that ID is is matching with the containers folder in the containers directory, right? And same for the engines. Now information about the particular container is stored inside the directory. Okay, now similarly, let's check the contents inside the image directory at the same level as that of the container. So let's go back here, and if you go to the same level, cd image, and here if you do ls, you would see there is a directory with the name overlay2. What is this overlay2? Let's run the docker info command and grep for overlay2. That will give us the information what this overlay2 is, and grep overlay2, there it is. It's the storage driver used by the docker by the name overlay2. If we go within this directory cd overlay2 and do an ls, let's clear the screen a bit, okay, so we are into the var lib docker image overlay2 directory. And then if we go ahead and list the files in this particular one, we will find a file called repositories.json. Right now, this is the list of all the images that we have on the Docker host. So if you go ahead and list all the images that we have on this Docker list, so you see all this engine, Redis and hello world, and now if you cat the repositories.json, you would find these very images names in this repository, that is hello world we have here, then we have the Mongo, we have Ubuntu, all of the images that we have, it is also there in this particular JSON file. In this nugget, we will know about the container names and host names. By default, Docker provides a random name to the container. The container host name is set to the same name as the container ID. Container name is set to a different random name from a set of predefined names in the Docker. Container name can be checked using the ps command. So whereas the host name, we need to run the host name command, and once it is attached to the container, and then find out the host name. So let's go back to our host and run an Ubuntu container without specifying the name and the host name. Let's run the docker run it d for the detached mode and Ubuntu. We are not specifying any name as of now here. So now check the container name by running the docker ps command. So now we have the container name is set to Happy Kowalski. This is a random name picked from the containers. Now attach to this container and check the host name. So let's run the attach command. Okay, so now if we do the host name command, it is observed that the container name is random predefined name, whereas the host name is same as the container ID. Let's exit from this. Now the container name can be set by using the -- name option. So let's go back to our host and run another Ubuntu container and specify only the container name while we are running the container. So let's go back here and say docker run -- name. Let's give it as the name as test1 con name it id and Ubuntu. Okay, now let's check it with the docker ps command. Okay, so here you can see the test1 con name is given to this particular container. Now let's do a docker attach and run the host name command to find out the host name. Okay, so container name is set to the value provided, but the host name is still the same as the container ID. Let's exit from this. Container host name can be set by using the -- host name option. Let's run another Ubuntu container and specify both the container name and host name this time. So let's go back to our host and run docker run name. This time we'll give it as test2 con name, and the host name will be giving as host name test2 host name it in the detached mode, and we'll be running the Ubuntu. Okay, so now let's do the docker ps command. Right, so we find the test2 con name for the container. Let's attach to this docker. Okay, and run the host name command to find out the host name what it has given. Now as you can see, the container name and host name both are set to the values that we provided. Here it is host name 2 and it is host 2 host name. That's what we had provided in our command. Let's exit out of this. Hello everyone. In this nugget, we will understand how to work with multiple containers simultaneously. Before we run the containers, publishing a port means providing external access to your application. We will cover this in detail in the networking topic.